Good evening, everybody. I'm Tommy,
And I'm Dante.
and you're listening to Twigging onto Twig. Maybe in the evening, maybe in the morning, maybe during the day. I don't know why I said evening. But you are, in fact, listening to Twigging onto Twig, a podcast where we talk about Wildbow's most skakic web serial, Twig. Now, Dante, you wrote that bit of the script, and that is a word I do not know,
So, skakic means the same thing as chessic,
which
which
is not
is
helpful.
having to do with chess.
Ah,
So,
okay.
we're doing a lot of scheming, or not scheming, but like strategy,
Plotting
and Sai is talking a lot about being on one side of the chessboard and Mauer being on the other side, and there's a lot of that going on. So,
sure.
I felt it was appropriate. Also,
Yeah.
I looked up word for having to do with chess, and it came up with a word I'd never heard before, and I was like, perfect, that's exactly what I wanted.
I am quickly Googling the etymology of that, so I am very curious. Skakic, from Italian scacchi, chess. Helpful. Lovely. Thank you. Okay. I was hoping for
Excellent.
something more interesting. So what are we doing here today?
So, today's episode, we are talking about Cat Out of the Bag 2.9 and 2.10. And I had an idea. I was thinking that since the audiobook has a little chapter blurb for every chapter, might be fun to read those out.
Sure.
So,
Is that what's here?
yeah. So, the chapter summaries from the audiobook 2.9, in which Mauer finally catches on that the lambs are actively working against him. Took him long enough, if you ask me. And chapter 2.10. If you want to learn more about Stitched, this is the chapter for you. If you're eager to find out whether Mauer will ever see Sly as an equal, this is the chapter for you. If you want to listen to another chapter of Twig, this is the chapter for you.
Lovely. So, I guess before we get into the real stew of the episode, there are a few housekeeping things that we should probably talk about.
Yeah, I feel like housekeeping is not the appropriate word, but
Not at all.
there are some tangential items that we should talk about because it's probably been like a week or two by this point.
Pale is done, so go
Pale
read
is
that.
done.
You are listening to us and have not read Pale.
Yeah, and not only is Pale done, but Wildbow is taking a vacation. He's going to write a few essays and then take a bit of a hiatus, and I think he said he'd start up again in the new year with a new story or something.
Well, not to, hold him to things that he has said, because it's very much up to him, but I think he mentioned March as a potential timeline, so that'd be March 2024, if
Yeah.
you happen to be listening in the future.
So, yeah, very momentous occasion for us in the fandom, and I really feel like we should do a bonus episode about Pale, just a
full
one-off.
We talk about Pale for 36 hours.
That no one would ever be able to do something like that. That's way too wild for anyone to be able to pull off.
So, Dante, what were you up to this weekend?
Oh yeah, so this past weekend I was watching a 36-hour stream of people talking about Pale. How about that? Yep. Coincidentally, yeah, so all packed up to the charity live stream by the folks behind Pale Reflections was a couple days ago, and
seemed to be a wild success.
Yeah, well, it was hugely entertaining, and there's recordings of it on Twitch if you want to check it out.
Apparently under the wrong name. I don't know if that's been fixed by now, but at some point it was referencing Dead Space and other games. So
and I'm sure they'll figure that out. The important thing is that they, for some reason, thought that it would be worth having us join in the discussion a couple times. So we got to call in, and we had a bit of a conversation with the Ottawa meetup group, talking about Canadianisms and such.
How they appeared in Pale.
Yes. And then after that, we were part of a fan art competition. And
judging it, not producing it, I don't have the talent for.
Yes. That was super fun. A lot of great fan art. And you know what? We should, when we're done this podcast, in the far, far future, we should totally do a fan art competition review thing for Twig.
Is there a lot of Twig fan art out there? I mean, I'm assuming
I
so.
assume there's some, but
Yeah,
there definitely should be lots, and there should be more of what there is.
I agree. Well, I feel like Twig is just so visually distinctive.
Yes.
It's very. Oh, your cat is being going wild behind you. Um, uh, what is? Anyway, oh, boom, 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 boom. But yeah, just more so. I don't know if that's it's right to say more distinctive aesthetically than like the other verse or the Parahumans universe, but it there's an element to it that feels like it would lend itself to some form of stylized art very
Mhm.
well.
Yes. And I think we've commented on that before because like the header art in the work itself
Hmm.
is already very distinctive and
Yeah,
very highly suitable for the work itself. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in that, and it was super fun looking at and reviewing fan art for Pale, and we should totally do that
I
for
agree,
Twig. Once we get around to it.
and I
Um,
think yeah. Oh, go ahead.
yeah.
You were saying something.
Oh, I was going to say, like, I was kind of thinking about this whole situation. Like, Pale has wrapped up, and Pale Reflections has wrapped up with All Packed Up too.
Pale in
And
comparison is
Pale,
about to be wrapped up.
yeah, like we had this whole ecosystem of creativity
Biology word.
revolving around, yeah, revolving around Wildbow and Pale, and all of that has kind of like come to a conclusion, and the sort of era of time is kind of wrapping up. But we're just gonna keep plowing ahead. So
We're
we've
just
gone
getting
from
started.
yes, so we've gone from being like just a part of this whole ecosystem to now just kind of screaming into the void all on our own. And that's a little bit daunting, but also like now is the perfect time to get everyone invested in Twig.
Absolutely. Now, Screaming into the Void is the name of the podcast for whatever void is the four-letter word for whatever universe
Yes, assuming that one of his future works is going to be
called Void.
called Void. Oh, you know what I was thinking? Because Wildbow was kind of mentioning in his sign-off essay from Pale that among his ideas for future work was the sci-fi. And I think everyone's assuming that this means like spaceships and aliens or whatever. But like most of Wildbow's works so far have been solidly sci-fi, including Twig.
Well, Twig absolutely has. Yeah,
So I think, I don't actually think, but I'm going to pretend that I think that his next work is going to be in the Twigverse,
it's
and
going
we're
to
going to
be
get a Twig sequel.
it's going to be a crossover between the other verse and Twig, and it's going to be
Now
called
you can't have a
Port.
crossover between two universes because you can't start a single four-letter word with two with two different letters.
Okay, it's going to be Wildbow's going to realize that he really likes writing lawyers in the Otherverse, so maybe try to apply that to the Twig universe and write tort.
Okay.
That's a legal word.
Yes. All right.
Um,
This is definitely canon now. Uh, yeah.
and I see you have another more personal bit of housekeeping announcement
Oh yeah, because Pale is done, and All Packed Up 2 is done, and my good friend Basil,
is
who has
done.
been present in the last few episodes of our podcast, his stay at our house is done because
Very
he has
sad.
been adopted. So it's
Which is
sad for us, but it's really great news because that's why we foster these cats is so that they
mhm.
can find a good home, and
So
Basil has found a
congratulations,
good
Basil.
home. Yeah, so he's actually still here with me. He's sitting on my lap right now. He's getting picked up by his new family in a few days. And we also have another kitten staying with us who's going to be adopted with him. So they're staying with us to get to know each other. Benny is the name of the other cat, and he was crawling all over me while we were doing our stream on All Packed Up too. So if you were watching that, you'll have seen Benny.
I just see
Um,
his paw reaching out in the background right now. I don't know what he's reaching for, but
yeah.
it's something.
So Basil and Benny are both running around behind me. So if there's a lot of crashing and banging behind me, that's what's going on. So yeah.
Yep. And before we get started, I just want to tell you that I am about halfway through Yarrow, which we mentioned on this podcast before.
Oh, sweet.
It's interesting.
How are you liking it so far?
It it has a very dated feel. I'm enjoying it very much, and I'm not sure I know how to articulate what I mean by a dated feel, but it feels like a fantasy book from. I mean, I guess it is a fantasy book from like the 70s, 80s, but it has that feel.
Sure.
Yeah. Yarrow is one of the, according to Dante's research, one of the founding fathers of urban fantasy.
Specifically, the author of Yarrow,
Yes, not
Charles
sorry.
DeLint.
The book itself is not founding fantasy. Um, but yeah, but the fun thing is that it takes place in Ottawa, and the author really wants you to know that it takes place in Ottawa because it's name dropping specific streets and intersections and houses and stuff
Yeah,
every other paragraph.
I was literally doing an errand a couple weeks ago, and I happened to be driving. I'm like, wait a second, this is like the block on which Cat lives from
Mhm.
Yarrow, and I like look out my window, and there's her house, and
Yeah. But yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. It's I don't know where it's going, but yeah,
Mhm.
it's fun.
Yeah, we should do a special episode about that too. We have
That'd be
so
fun.
many ideas for special episodes, and like I feel like we can't really do special bonus episodes with a sporadic release schedule
Yeah, but I mean,
because
I think we can because we're not beholden to a strict release schedule by, the work is already out. It's not going to like get away from us if we
that's true.
but I
So
guess yeah.
yeah,
All right, should we get into the episode itself?
yes. So yeah, 2.9, 2.10. Just some general thoughts. First of all, is it just me, or do you also find yourself wanting to call Reverend Mauer Musser?
I absolutely have more than once. Um
Now, I don't know if that is solely because of the names. I think that the names themselves are sufficient for me to mix them up, but I think there's possibly some interesting comparisons to be made between them. Not here because of pale
yeah,
spoilers, but
but yeah. It'd be interesting to take some time to actually do a comparison analysis. Well, especially once we sorry, just seeing Benny lick your ear there. Um, yeah, just it'd be interesting to to get into an analysis of both of them, assuming Mauer there's more to Mauer than this particular arc.
mhm,
Um, as an antagonist, and you know, brief pale spoilers, but Musser is a representation of like the calcified institution. He is privilege like incarnate, essentially, and I'm
mhm,
curious that and obviously Mauer is a representation of another institution that has a lot of power, which is the church.
mhm.
And I'm
But
curious.
also like the breaking of the power of the
Yes,
academy,
yeah,
or at least the attempt.
yeah. So it'd be interesting to do a
Mhm,
pale in comparison segment on
mhm.
that at some point.
Definitely. The other general thought I had was just like a bit of reeling at the complexity of the story. So, like every Wildbow story I've read, which is all of them except this one, there comes to be a point where I just completely lose track of what's going on. There's so much going on. There's
Just
so many factions, so many plot threads, and I just can't keep it all in my head anymore.
just along for the ride.
Exactly. And that hasn't happened for Twig yet, but I did start to feel a bit of that with just like, especially because we have both of these sides in this chapter. We have Mauer and his plotting, and we have the Lambs and Sai's plotting, but it's constantly changing. Like, both sides are just changing, like, what their goals are, what we think their goals are, what they think each other's goals are. And it's just like so much going on. It was so complex. And I was just like overwhelmed as to what was going on.
I think part of that is because both sides have utterly lost control of the situation in any they in any meaningful way. All they can do is sort of tug and push and hope that the crowd and the situation reacts in the way that they'd like.
Mhm.
So it's like any kind of concerted effort and plot is just lost by both of them. I mean, though we do get a hint that some of this has happened as per planned by Mauer, since the retreat
Yes.
was too clearly
Yeah.
organized for it to just be a
Yeah.
chaotic thing. But
We definitely find out that there's still more left unrevealed
with Mauer, yeah,
with Mauer, yeah. So anyway, we did our best to try and summarize what was going on. We're going to get into the chapter summary.
yep,
Hopefully, we get it more or less the way it happened.
yeah.
Uh,
So
so, wish us luck. You go ahead with the first part.
sure. So, previously on Twig, Reverend Mauer had had whiskers released so that people would think they were in danger from the Academy and would come to him for protection. The
Mm-hmm.
lambs pretended that there were more monsters that were attacking, so that the people would riot and the Academy would blame Reverend Mauer. And the people do start to riot a bit, and Cecil was sent off to summon the Academy. Mauer announced that the Academy was attacking the people and that he had a plan to fight back.
Yes. And I couldn't remember, was the Academy actually attacking at that point? Like, Cecil
No,
went off to summon the Academy.
I don't
Did
think
the
so.
Academy get there, and that's when Mauer announced that they were attacking?
No, they announced that they were attacking when Gordon had chopped himself up and covered himself in soap and threw himself through a window and screamed, "They're attacking."
Okay. So the attack from the Academy is still in the future.
Yes.
So then we get the start of Cat Out of the Bag 2.9. Mauer is working on calming the people and preparing them to make a stand against the Academy, this attack from the Academy that is still completely fabricated by Mauer.
Yes.
Cecil returns from going off to summon the Academy, and Jamie has an idea. Sai sees that Jamie has an idea and decides to solve her time by calling out Mauer as a fraud in front of the whole crowd. After some back and forth between Cecil and or not between Sai and Mauer, Cecil comes forward and pretends to announce that there were more riots elsewhere in the city and reads out names of people who got hurt. These are actually names that Jamie gave him of loved ones of people in the crowd. So the crowd, thinking that people they love have gotten hurt by riots elsewhere, really does riot this time. So finally, they've got the riot they want.
Tidily.
Tidily, but this also clues in Mauer to the fact that the lambs are actually working together against him.
Yeah.
So are the Stitched Army attacking yet?
I think they are showing up.
Okay, so now we have
Though I think they really show up in the narrative at the start of 2.10.
Okay, so now we have this arriving army of Stitched from the Academy on one side. We have Mauer himself and his cronies on the other side.
His army buddies.
Yeah, and we've got this crowd of scared and rioting people in the middle. I think most of them have left the church building at this point, so they're all milling about outside.
That's the feeling I get, but I also don't know, considering I feel like it probably is that there's so many people have gathered in the area that it's just impossible for everybody to fit in the church. And I
Sure.
think we're not meant to really get a real feel of where and how and everything is distributed, just because it really adds to the chaotic vibe.
For sure.
You know,
Yeah.
Sai only sees what he sees and knows what he knows.
That's true. And yeah, so the lambs are just kind of running about throughout this whole situation. And that's where 2.9 ends and 2.10 begins.
Yep. In 2.10, the good Reverend disappoints Sai by seeing him not as an equal, but rather as a part of the group. Not that, Mauer has had any reason to see Sai as organizing or leading or doing anything that puts him apart from the rest of the lambs. Mary is a good little psychopath.
Wait, what?
Oh, she's just going around slashing people with a big grin on her face.
Oh, so business as usual for her then.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
The attacking Stitch from the Academy smashed through the panicking crowd, but Mauer's old war buddies hold the line, more or less. They clearly know how to fight Stitch, though not all their strategies are up to date anymore. Sai sows further chaos, and the riot devolves into untidiness. Sai also finds Lillian and rescues her, but only to get a scalpel and soap to bring to Gordon, who then uses the scalpel and soap to convince the crowd that the monster attack on him was fake and set up by Mauer. Mauer retreats, and Sai realizes that this was the plan all along, or something like it. Helen attempts to stop Mauer, but Sai realizes that Mauer is going to shoot Helen, so he tells her to let him go, which she does, though it seems very unhappily. Sai follows and witnesses Mauer controlling Whiskers. Gordon stops him from confronting Mauer on his own.
Mm-hmm. So
So yeah,
a
ton of
lot
stuff
going
going
on.
on.
Pardon?
Ton of stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about was this whole manipulation of the crowd.
Yeah,
Because Mauer is trying to manipulate the crowd. Sai is trying to manipulate the crowd.
it's this whole back and forth tug of
Mm-hmm.
war
Yeah.
of the crowd.
And sometimes, like, the way the crowd reacted, I felt was kind of weird. And I realized that it was partially because. Okay, so question for you. How many actual parishioners do you think are in this crowd? Like,
Uh,
percentage wise?
of you mean actual parishioners versus like community members who are scared and gathering in an area that
Yeah.
are like, oh, I don't know, just because well, there's a few different things that factor into that, right? We know that Mauer has been remarkably successful at preaching and proselytizing in this community. So I don't know, as a guess, maybe
Well,
like
he's been successful
25 to
in.
50.
Okay, he's been successful in building up the church community. I don't know if he's
Yeah,
been successful at, like,
expanding the community.
well, not so much expanding the community because, like, the way I imagine it, and this is based on the way I understand a lot of churches are nowadays, which maybe is not a good comparison. But you have, like, the people who go to the church and the people who live near the church, and those are two completely different groups of people that never interact most of the time.
Sorry, do you mind repeating that? I didn't.
Yeah. So you have the people who attend the church,
Yeah.
who show up on Sundays or whatever.
Right, the
Yeah.
regulars.
And then you have the people who live near the church, like the people who live, like,
Oh, just the
down
common.
the
Yeah,
street.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. And those two groups of people almost never interact.
I would assume that in the world of Twig, and I know, historically, though I guess that's less true in a city, um, but like, historically the church tended to be the center of the community,
Mm-hmm.
which is a way that it is not now.
Yes. But
Um,
also, we have to factor in the fact that this is a city that
academy.
is
Yeah.
remarkably unreligious and where,
Yeah.
like, being part of this group of faithful is kind of unusual.
Yeah. And, but again, we know that Mauer has been, like, people did not expect him to be as successful. So I would assume, well, I don't know if this is necessarily the point that you're going to, but I feel like in this moment, everybody is a member of this church community just because it's the place where people went for safety and
Yes.
community.
Yes, but that is not what I was getting at. Because in this church, we have a lot of people, like I said, the second group, the people who live near the church but don't really interact with it. Those people would be flocking to the church now for safety, but they
Yeah.
wouldn't see Mauer as a leader that they already trust. They see him as,
Sure.
like, a
Okay,
member of
I
the community
see what
who's
you're
stepping
getting
up.
at. I see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I would assume that it's not that because we do see members, important members of the community, potential mayors and whatnot, as like friends of Mauer,
Mhm.
which means that presumably, even if they don't go to to church, they know him as a figure of authority and trust.
Mhm. Yeah. So when I started kind of reading this, I kind of assumed that most of the people in this crowd
Were
were
parishioners.
regular parishioners. So they were people who were like, there's kind of a problem. Reverend Maurer is doing something for the community. Seems like a good place for us to go. Let's go to the church and,
Mhm.
like, take shelter there. And then maybe there was, like, a few dozen people living kind of on the block or something who went to the church for shelter, and other people in other parts of town might have
Yeah,
gone to other places for shelter.
but the crowd feels too big for that
The
in a way.
crowd feels too big for that, but also, like, the reactions of the crowd to Sai and Mauer makes me feel that, because if they were parishioners, they would probably have a lot of trust, like intrinsic trust and
Mhm.
built up over time trust in Mauer. And so
Yeah,
anything Sai says
is already fighting against that.
is already fighting against that. And, like, there is this phenomenon that you might have seen written about, where, like, if people have, like, this deep-seated conviction that is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and you present them evidence that it's wrong, they tend to double down on their convictions and
Right.
believe in them even more strongly.
Yeah.
So even if Sai is saying things that make sense about, like when he confronts Mauer to make a point,
Mm-hmm.
and by time, and he's like, "You never had faith at all, did you? You're lying to us. Why are you lying?" Like, if the crowd were parishioners, they would all just completely,
Ignore
like,
that.
they would ignore it. They would be even more against Sai and more faithful to Mauer because of that. And so, realizing that Sai thinks he's actually changing minds and even has a chance suggests to me that actually a very large proportion of this crowd doesn't have that intrinsic trust of Mauer already. And they're just regular people who see him as another regular person who just happens
Mm-hmm.
to be
That's
stepping up to leadership.
That's valid. That's a fair point. I don't necessarily know that I have anything to argue with you on that, but I did mention in the notes later on, and you brought it up, so I feel like it's a good place to bring it up. That I feel like Sai in that moment, especially specifically with that line that you mentioned, you said there that oh, you never believed in God, um, is too cerebral to argue with a panicked crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's only and I don't know if Sai necessarily realizes that it doesn't work, or it asks the crowd to be thinking too much in their panic.
Yeah.
um Whereas his next one, which is his next bit, which is this appeal to empathy and whatnot to the crowd by acting the scared child, feels like a much
Mm-hmm.
more effective response.
Yeah. So anyway, the whole reason I wanted to bring this up is
Yeah.
because, we have this whole back and forth. We have Mauer trying to control the crowd. We have Sai trying to break his control over the crowd.
Hmm.
And I had assumed that most of the people in the crowd were parishioners. And so it was very confusing for me how the crowd was kind of going back and forth, like
Yeah.
panicking, being calmed, panicking, being calmed, feeling a little bit more against Mauer, feeling a little bit more favor to Mauer. But once I kind of clicked that actually, no, probably
This
most
is
of
a
these people
community.
don't go here normally, don't already have that trust in
Hmm.
Mauer, that's when it kind of started to make sense and be like, okay, yes, actually I can see how this back and forth is working and how there's actually like an even match between the
Sure.
two of them.
That makes sense. And it is pointed out a number of times in the text how that there's a difference between Mauer's like inner circle and
Mhm.
the crowd itself.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like those inner circle, those people who have the weapons and stuff, like those are definitely part of his inner circle.
Yeah.
There's probably some people there who are like regular churchgoers who aren't part of that inner circle as well, but probably there are not really that many of them, and it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
to to the
Definitely.
to the dynamics here. So in addition to this whole crowd dynamics,
Yeah, which is an
we,
interesting one. It's not something that I really picked up on, so I'm glad you brought that up. That seems really interesting. That's a really interesting point. The whole
mhm,
regular community versus the inner circle.
mhm. Actually, on that subject, I was actually at church once when a heckler came in.
Okay.
Um, and this guy, he like starts talking about like, I forget what part of like the service it was, but he was just like kind of talking to everyone, being like, "You guys, you're like buying into this whole, the church is just here to control you, blah blah blah." And I was like, that that guy, like, honestly, everyone in the church just felt sorry for him. They're like, "Look at this guy, like he thinks he's doing something, and he's actually just
Yeah.
making a fool of himself." And like everyone
Not.
just kind of ignored him, and it was just like whatever.
Yeah.
And so when I was reading this, that's kind of what was in the back of my head. Like, Sai
Is that
is
guy.
that guy, and all these people here who are followers of Mauer are just like, "Oh, that poor kid, like he's so misguided, like someone just like take him out so that he's not disturbing the rest of us anymore." So
Yeah.
that's kind of where that whole
Sure.
thought process kind of stemmed from.
Might have been a bit different in your situation had you had the fear of like a werewolf attacking you all. And
Yes. Yes. An actual like life or death scenario
yeah.
thing going on. Yes. Very different situations, but that's kind of just where my
No,
well,
of course,
possibly
of
as well.
course. Yeah.
So in addition to this crowd dynamics thing with between Mauer and Sai and the crowd itself, we also have a bunch of like individual plans
Yeah.
going on. And we'll talk about Sai's plan in a bit, and we'll talk about Mauer's plan in a bit.
But
But I want to
Jamie.
talk about Jamie's plan because like it was a very good plan.
Oh yeah,
um,
definitely. I think, and it's a plan that kind of reinforces how utterly terrifying Jamie can be.
mhm. So specifically, we're talking about the plan where uh, he gets Cecil to read out the names of the kids
The dead,
of the dead people from elsewhere in town. Um,
specifically names that he has overheard from just in the crowd throughout the day, people that are there, and relating them to bits of census data or other things he has heard over the course of his entire life.
yeah, like that's incredible.
Utterly terrifying.
And also, like what I thought it was really interesting how not only is it a good plan, but also Sai knows that it's going to be a good plan,
Mhm.
and he's like, I see that Jamie has a plan, and I'm going to put my plan on hold and make space for Jamie's plan to happen. And
Yeah.
I thought that was a really fascinating
Well,
dynamic
I
there.
feel like, yeah, the plans kind of build on each other.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I do want to note, utterly unrelated to the actual worth of the plans themselves, I was kind of surprised that Cecil was a pretty good actor.
I mean, every time he does something, Sai remarks on how bad he is at doing it. So
Yeah.
I don't know where you're coming with this bad act, with this good acting.
Oh, well, he was convincing here.
He was convincing enough. That's true.
Yeah. It worked. It was
I think that this was a situation where his natural awkwardness is easily mistaken for like
fear.
fear and like sadness at all
Mhm.
this loss and whatever. So his bad acting kind of worked in his favor.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Hmm. Yeah. But Jamie's plan does have a couple of problems that Sai points out.
Yeah.
First of all, um, it makes people think that the Academy struck first, which,
It's
you know,
not tidy.
Sai points out that whoever struck first loses the people's good opinion. And so, with the people think the Academy struck first, people have a bad opinion of the Academy. This is not the clean solution that Hale wants.
Yeah.
And secondly, it kind of revealed the lambs as
I don't know if that's as much a problem as Sai seems to think it is, considering it feels like Mauer already has a pretty good idea that the lambs are
yeah, but what it
working.
does is it limits the amount of options that are available to them.
Sure, yeah.
So, like we were saying, like their plans are always changing, like over and over constantly.
Yeah.
And this is
Yep.
one of those things where, okay, we've cut off all of the options that involve, you know, being under the radar, and we have to make a new plan.
Yeah.
So the new plan,
Sai's plan.
Sai's plan, which he goes over in his head, he breaks it down to 3 pieces. Well, he breaks it down to 2 pieces,
Two pieces, and then adds the most important piece.
Yeah. So the first piece is find Helen and rescue Lillian.
Mhm.
But in this step, he doesn't include Gordon for some reason. The second part of the plan is to maximize disruption.
Shake a box.
Yes, the usual Sai plan. And then thirdly, and most importantly, make the shepherd see him as an equal.
You butt.
So, like, you really get the impression that this is kind of as far as his plan goes.
Oh yeah, but I mean that's kind of the strength of Sai that we see regularly. It is, well, I guess it's both his strength and his weakness. Is that he's really good at adapting on the fly and like making things happen.
Yeah. So I kind of wonder whether at this point, does he have his whole plan kind of in his head, but he's just not telling us the end goal and he's only telling us like these 3 things that he's starting with? Or is he going by the seat of his pants? He's like, we'll find Helen, we'll rescue Lillian, we'll maximize disruption, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's halfway in between there. In that his his goal of rescue Lillian, as we saw, is to get scalpels and soap to get to Gordon, and then trust that Gordon is able to do the disruption part.
No, he does the disruption before that.
Did he? I thought the point of the disruption was like, or I thought the disruption was the whole giving Gordon the scalpel so that Gordon can be like, Mauer made me do this. This is fake. It's soap.
Sure.
I
But
thought that was
there was a point before Gordon did that announcement thing where Sai said to himself, okay, disruption managed. Point two, check.
what was that? I don't remember that. Not that, to be
I don't
honest.
remember exactly what he did, but that was the point where everyone left the building.
Oh, I have completely blanked. Let me run quick through the. Where's my tab? Blue, blue, blue. I should not blue, 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 blue because then the auto silence will not remove it.
Well, I think you offered to edit this one, so
Yes, but
that's on you.
I am actually traveling this week. I'm happy.
So I'll have to do
I'm
it.
happy to edit it. It just might take longer. So it's up to you. Which is also something we can keep there. Oh, I'm going next rather than past.
Yeah, so this is when the Stitched are attacking. Sai and Mary are scrapping with them, and he yells, "Run away!" And everyone just kind of like
Oh,
does
right.
a stampede, runs out of the church.
Because they're all already, as Sai says, or thinking about it, and he's like tips them over the edge. Yeah, okay, that's a disruption.
And then he says, "Disruption managed. Now for the rescue of Lillian."
Okay.
So anyway, you think that this is all that there is to it. He's doing the disruption, he's rescuing Lillian, and then he'll figure out afterwards like what the next steps are. But then it turns out that the disruption and the rescuing of Lillian are all in service to this end goal, which is getting Gordon the tools he needs to convince everyone that that Mauer faked the monster attacks, which, despite the fact that they're totally making this up as they go, is actually what Mauer did. So this is actually a really smart thing for them to do.
Yeah, but not... Well, it is a smart thing to do, obviously, but it's not... I don't know where I'm going with that. Sorry.
Yeah. So Mauer did release Whiskers to fake an attack on the people. Mauer didn't release this fake scalpel monster, but by pretending that they have proof that Mauer did release the scalpel monster, it has the same effect as if they had managed to convince people that he had actually released Whiskers in the first place, which is what he did. So,
well, I think the main difference there is the immediacy of it.
Sure, yes, because it's definitely more of a powerful, like...
It's scary to see a kid all chopped up than it is to hear, someone on the other side of town was killed by Whiskers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think by... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
I was just going to kind of wrap things up, but if you have something to say, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, the immediacy of having Gordon looking like he was just attacked by a monster kind of robs Mauer of the sort of, not necessarily control, but the fact that Mauer knows that the monster is not nearby and is controllable and all that means that he has a certain leverage over the crowd because there's no kind of real fear, whereas now, the crowd is afraid but not panicked, whereas if the threat is immediate and right there, the crowd is panicked, and a panicked crowd is much harder to control.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, I does want the crowd to be uncontrollable.
Exactly. Like that's the point of the whole. Well, I guess it's also this is proof of how well the lambs work together. This was Gordon's plan. That Sai's adapting. That Jamie's adapting. That Sai's adapting, and they all sort of vibe really well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So their plan changing constantly on the fly, and it feels... What's really interesting is that it feels like just a scrappy toothpicks and bubblegum plan throughout, and yet it comes out in the end with like
cohesive,
a double checkmate.
Yeah.
To use a scat kick metaphor. So and then on the other side you have Mauer and his plan, which
we just still don't really know.
Yeah. Because, like, we kind of figure out, like, he revealed this plan at the end of, what was it, 2.8? The chapter of...
Yeah, the one was like,
Where he was like...
I know that they were always going to come for you.
And we're going to fight back and make a stand. Yeah. So most of his actions throughout this kind of support that. Like, we're going to stand up to the Academy, and the Academy does show up, so he's able to do some standing up to it. So that's kind of good and straightforward and
But
whatever.
what doesn't play into that is the fact that he has that retreat planned for himself and his specific crowd of
Yes.
people, leaving the population to presumably be murdered.
Mhm.
Which does, I'm certain, play into his plan really well. In that, look, the academy system, the academy murdered all these people. We were lucky to escape by the skin of our teeth. We were defending
Mhm.
ourselves as the monsters that like the irresponsible academy created them and then
Mhm.
couldn't control, etc., etc.
Yeah.
He's able to be that messenger, that voice for all the people that were killed in his plan.
So, yeah. And we do have 2 more chapters in this arc to possibly get the last pieces
Well,
of that.
one and an interlude.
Yes, which I am counting.
Yeah. Well, it. I don't know that it necessarily counts as a chapter. It counts as a chapter in terms of text, but presumably it gives us insight in a different way.
Yes, but hopefully it'll be insight into Mauer and what he's up to.
I would assume so.
Yes. So anyway, I think that's more or less all that I have to say about all of the plot and plotting.
Yeah. There were just a couple other things I wanted to say. The line, if we do this right, if the Academy has any humanity at all, it shouldn't come to a fight, which is interesting coming from someone who witnessed the president of the Academy being like, I don't give a fuck, just bomb them all.
Yeah.
Just like, really?
Well, if his plan is to show that the Academy has no humanity, then by saying, if the Academy has humanity, it shouldn't come to a fight.
Yeah,
Knowing that it will come to a fight,
fair
and
enough. Okay,
therefore,
that's valid.
clearly, obviously, the Academy has no humanity.
Yeah, that's totally valid. That almost certainly is the right interpretation of that. Yeah. And the other thing that I want to talk about is that Sai argues that he's not good at strategy, but he's good at plotting. And
Mhm.
I don't necessarily see a difference besides an artificial one.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
I remarked on that further down in under the character discussions, but
Okay.
yeah, like
Like,
I'm great at plotting. I can plot like nobody's business, but strategy, I suck at strategy. I'm like, so what you're saying is you're bad at plotting.
I think maybe the distinction here is, but it's not even, the distinction is that strategy is like bigger scale, maybe. But
I
then
think that
here is Sai is like strategizing about a crowd, which is pretty big.
mhm.
I don't really know.
I wonder if maybe it's based on how much he does on the fly. Like how I was saying, like with his plan, all of the little pieces that we saw kind
Yeah,
of move towards the big checkmate at the end.
sure.
But maybe it really was him just like making these little things. Like we'll do the rescue of Lillian, we'll maximize disruption, and then we'll see. And then when he
And
saw later, he was like, "Oh, hey, we're in a good position. We can wrap this up nicely." And that's his plotting. He's like, "I can make these things happen so that I have options that I can run with, but I'm not good at planning
the bigger
way in
theater
advance."
of it. And I can see this also being related
Which I
to
don't
his
think is true because all of his plots are
or
these big
strategy.
Rube Goldberg machines that end up in
Yes.
a good position. So,
I can sort of see this tying into his whole "I am not good at fighting" thing, because I
mhm.
can sort of see it like you said, I feel like as he's doing this, as he fights, he gets bogged down in every single possibility, all these like branching trees of chess moves, and while
Yes.
he's getting lost in that, he's getting punched in the face.
Yes.
And
But he still thinks of himself as like dealing with this as like a chessboard against Mauer.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
chess is all about strategy. Like nobody talks about like chess plotting. It's chess strategy.
that's because chess players are all pretentious. It's really plotting and scheming.
We should have more plotting and scheming in chess. It would be way more fun.
Yes, I have assassinated your queen. All right. Do you want to move on into our world building?
World building.
All right. So I just had one thing, well, a few different things, but just general world building. There's the line. He knows the Academy can't just slaughter its people. Even with all the weapons they have at their disposal, the Academy can't get everyone. If they let some slip the net, then the word spreads. It cripples Radham and it hurts the crown as a whole. So, a few things here. The first one of it is its people. This is a really big paragraph. We kind of get a
Like the
rundown.
Academy can't slaughter its people, so we're talking
Yeah,
about the
the
Academy's people.
Academy's people.
Yeah.
And to me, this tells us a lot about the social structure in which people live. And well, it kind of makes me wonder whether this is an extension of like the feudal system, extending into this more technocratic system rather than our own world's capitalism. So, in theory, the crown is the absolute owner of all the land and everything that is on that land, including the people. And then, historically, in feudalism, that land would be leased out to powerful individuals, nobles, who are then responsible for extracting wealth and shipping that upwards to the crown while taking their own cut. And then nobles would break it down to smaller nobles, and then essentially down to manor lords whole ruling individual villages and
Mm-hmm.
administrating the land there. And I'm kind of wondering whether instead of our system of capitalism, where in our history the individual wealthy landowners were able to buy up land and peasantry and essentially and uh, operate the way we kind of see it now in our world, whether the academy has replaced the nobility here.
Mm-hmm.
Just again, yeah, the phrase, the fact that the academy is talked about as possessive of the people.
Mm-hmm. See, I think this is interesting because I interpreted that very differently. So you're thinking of it literally, like the Academy actually owns the people in a certain way.
In a certain way, not necessarily like
Mhm.
actually owns the people, but
Yeah. Where I was kind of thinking it in more of like, you're saying this is less like capitalism. I was thinking more like capitalism, where the Academy is so like self-centered and arrogant that they see the local people as nothing more than a resource they can tap.
don't know that there's a distinction between what we're saying there.
Well,
Um,
like if the Academy is like the wealthy landowner and the people actually do, like they actually do own the resources that the people depend on,
yeah,
which they kind of do in terms of like medical care and whatever. But
exactly. I
like,
mean, we see that there's supposedly there's meant to be a reciprocity.
mhm.
The,
So like,
there's essentially a social contract that is meant to exist that
mhm,
is very clearly being abused
mhm.
by the academy.
So you make this distinction kind of between like the feudal system esque idea
Yeah.
of like the Academy as the nobility and the people as the peasantry.
Yes, but I mean, capitalism is very much an extension of the feudal system.
Okay.
It just, I'd say, an evolution of it, and in Twig, it's that evolution in a different direction.
Sure. Yeah, because I'm thinking so probably what you have in like this runaway capitalism where you don't actually own the people, but you kind of act as if you did.
Yeah, because you
And then,
own the means of production,
mhm. But it's
all
like,
the resources, and
but I'm kind of thinking like if you don't own the people, you might own like say you're a big corporation,
yeah,
and you have a product, and some of the people will be buying your product, and some of the people won't be buying your product, and so you don't really own the people. You're not like omnipowerful. You just are a big corporation, but maybe you don't care about that. Like I don't care about these people. Like so what if they are our customers or not? They're all just numbers,
yeah,
and so, like, I don't care about them except in that I treat them as they're
a
our,
product.
yeah,
They're a thing that I am extracting wealth and resources from.
exactly. They're a resource, but they're not. So it's just kind of maybe a difference in mindset where it's like if they're like all powerful, like some companies that literally do have something that everyone depends on.
Well, I mean, there's
Um,
also, historically, I know Amazon has talked about doing this kind of thing, but like the concept of company towns, where
mhm,
the
yeah,
employees live on land owned by the company and
mhm,
houses owned by the company, and they're paid by company scrip,
yeah,
which can only be spent at the company store.
yeah.
That's
That's a thing. I don't know if Amazon has done that yet, but there are a lot of
yet,
companies that
but
still do
Amazon
that.
has talked about
Hmm.
doing that. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's a thing that I would argue that's not functionally different from feudalism, except that
exactly.
nobility is not necessarily hereditary.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think that So in this case, where we're talking about the academy owning the people, like, is it owning the people in the sense of a company town having enough control over the populace that they really are, for all intents and purposes, your people that you can control, or is it like a big company that's trying to market to the people and doesn't care about the people except as a possible resource to extract money from?
I really feel like it's the former.
Okay, I kind of feel like it's the latter, and you might have a point that there might be no real meaningful
I
difference
don't
between
know
those
if
two
there is I
situations.
don't know that there is, but I'm just thinking like it feels like the company own or the academy, not the company, sorry, but the academy controls so many elements of most of the day-to-day life. At least I don't know, beyond healthcare, I guess we don't necessarily well, that's not true. Healthcare, we see that all the construction is academy centered. Um, Even the old buildings are propped up by vines and thorns and all that. Uh, Farmers all use stitch stuff, and I
Mhm.
guess I see that is kind of what you're saying, that the academy controls them through the products that they have and the things they are selling to the people. But I guess what I'm saying is that that line gets very blurred.
It does get very blurred. Um, mhm. And certainly, I think we can conclude that whether or not the academy does have that level of control over the people directly, it certainly acts as if it does.
Yes, it absolutely does. I mean, yeah, even if de facto they don't have that authority, I mean, just that boardroom meeting with the presidents all drinking wine and stuff is a very stark contrast to
Hmm.
they're like basically, oh, we can kill them all and start over with a new group of people.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The other little thing that I pulled out, which I didn't pull out nearly as much deep analysis out of it as you did from that one, but Maurer mentions that in the wars he saw some of the monsters from the other academies. So we've kind of had this discussion
Hmm.
many times about other academies and whether they're like,
Comparable.
clones of Radham that all kind of operate the same way, or whether they're like separate and rival. And I feel like that kind of shows like, no, they're their own thing. They're all making monsters for the war, but they're their own things. They've got their own specialties.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, absolutely. Um, for sure. And just speaking of monsters, I guess it's time for
Monster Corner.
Monster Corner
We didn't get any um,
submissions. I am very
submissions
disappointed
for
by
our
you all.
for our huge contest with extremely high stakes.
Yep.
Um,
So that contest will be running actively until we do get a result.
yeah.
Burn
Anyway,
Arcs in. Well, first, before we actually, do you mind if I read this quote?
yep.
In wartime, Dog and Catcher might attack supply lines, the Gorger might attack trains and coaches, or plow through regiments to attack leaders. Foster would bolster a group's numbers, and the Whelps might scout. So
Yeah.
first, I just want to point out this is Maurer talking about the monsters,
Mhm.
and I think it's a very smart, strategic move on his part to be talking about the monsters that are specific to Radham. He says, "Oh, I know the monsters. I've seen monsters from different academies, but these are the ones that you will have heard rumors about, and how they would
Yes.
be active in your area, and how things like them would be acting in the war."
Hmm.
Um, and we do get one new monster name there, I believe.
Do we? We've seen these names
Foster?
before.
I don't think we've seen Foster before, have we?
We heard the name Foster in the same place we heard the Whelps, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I could be wrong. I thought the Whelps were there and then Foster was new.
All right, let me look.
You're probably right.
All right, so the
Um,
quote several chapters ago was the Lambs, Dog and Catcher, the
mhm.
Hangman, Gorger, Foster, the Whelps, and all the
Oh,
rest.
okay. So I am wrong about that being a new monster.
Haha, I win.
Yes, you do.
This is a competition, of course, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
but either way, like we got no details about Foster or the whelps,
well,
but now we have.
yeah. Well, first we yeah, like I'm the whelps might scout. That's a very whatever comment. Like that doesn't give us anything. But Foster would bolster a group's numbers. Like, is Foster a mobile brainwashing device or like monster? In which case, like it can't be that because then what's the point of like the whole bad seeds plot? If you can just plop a Foster in the middle of a town and control them, is it like a
I mean, you can
brain?
have multiple projects doing similar things. I mean, it
Yeah.
says the whelps might scout. I feel like that's very similar to what the lambs are doing.
Well, I'm still not convinced that the whelps isn't just another name for the lambs.
Sure, but like the lambs and the whelps, assuming they're different projects,
Yeah, but just like
seem like two versions of the same thing.
yes.
Different manners, different end goals maybe, but there's enough overlap.
So the whelps are just the lambs with evil goatees.
They're like the linear guild from Order of the Stick.
Never read that.
Oh, it's so good.
Okay,
I should lend it to you. I've got
sure.
a few
Speaking
volumes of it.
of lending, how is Sandman going? Laura's been asking about it.
I have not made any more progress on that, to
Ah,
be perfectly honest. Uh, so yes,
okay.
I'm not so good with the print media.
What are you gonna do when we get to the end of the audiobook?
Cry.
Uh, send
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. I managed to get through Pale without an audiobook of that.
true.
Uh, yeah.
All
But
right.
anyway, so yeah, I don't know. Foster probably. I kind of imagine that Foster kind of like produces additional beings to
I don't know because
bolster a group.
we got was it 2 chapters ago, 3 chapters ago? They're talking about like self-reproducing threats, and that's
Hmm.
like a thing that the Academy tries not to do,
Yes, but maybe Foster has like maybe like a dozen
like a limiter
little like spare
bodies.
bodies that it could just be like, oh, you need more people here. I've got a few. You can have them.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
And
like
then
me.
the
I've got a few.
name
Like me, I've got a few spare kittens in my
few spare
house, and
fosters.
so if you need any extra kittens, I can just bring out my foster kittens and be like,
Yeah.
here.
Well, just the name itself has a certain brainwashy vibe to it.
See, I don't think so. I think it's just like the foster kittens. Like I'm not brainwashing my kittens. I'm just having them.
Maybe, maybe, yeah. It's just
But sure, maybe it is brainwashing. Maybe you're
I
right.
don't know. I really don't know. It's
The
a,
fun
like
thing is that we really have no idea because this
no
is
idea.
literally all the information we have about Foster is that it would
It
bolster a
bolstered
group's numbers.
Yeah, and I kind of assume also that these monsters aren't actually deployed in the war, just because the way we've been introduced to them is that like, oh, they're the ones that the Academy keeps to like clean stuff up. So I'm assuming really that Mauer is using names that the town would have heard about
Mhm.
as like analogies for
Yeah, the
types of
best
things.
known of the Academy's secret projects,
Yeah, exactly.
which I keep coming back to because it's just the funniest thing.
Mm. We also learned a few things about Stitched as
Because we got a whole like several paragraphs of rundown on how they behave, and
yeah,
so we already knew that they were flammable.
yep.
We already knew that they were not waterproof, although we did learn now that water damage will literally paralyze them.
Hmm.
We didn't know anything about these psychological ticks, I don't think.
I think we had a bit of an idea of it because we talked about like was it the crying man or the weeping man or whatever who was like a Stitch that had not properly it was,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, it
but
just
it's not just
that
that
sounded
guy.
that sounded like a one-off type of like, oh, it didn't work,
Exactly.
whereas this
Whereas
is like
now we know it's all of them, really,
all
to
of
a
them.
certain extent.
Yeah, it's especially horrifying because it's like, okay, it's not just a dead person. There's still the original person. Like, there's
Hmm.
still the memories there. There's still like some
Yeah,
aspect of personhood that's being repressed somehow.
exactly. And I think that's a theme that comes up a lot in when you have
I
like
mean, that's like the
in a
point.
fiction where you have creatures that are refurbished humans. I think
That's
the
like a
remains of their
point.
memories is often something that will come up eventually.
Absolutely. Like
Um,
I mean, that from the original bit, the kind of the from Frankenstein kind of goes into that, or the monster is the people who have created it, not the monster itself, because the monster is just a person.
mm, yeah. So yeah, and then like the whole thing, like it really reinforces, I think, what they said a few chapters ago about how flesh is cheap and dead flesh is cheaper.
Yeah,
It's like these creatures that are so ubiquitous, like the army, the military depends on them.
yeah,
The agricultural sector depends on them. Like so many aspects of society depend on them,
hmm
and they are so fragile.
yeah.
And it's just like
Like they're easily replaceable.
they're easily replaceable. It's just cheap. We'll just churn them out. If they blow up, who cares? We'll just make another one.
Yeah,
One thing that I thought was interesting was one of the stitched in this chapter gets a slash across the face,
yeah,
and they notice that it has like a coil of wire beneath the skin.
yeah. I noticed
And
that also.
because I was kind of imagining that these were like mostly just organism with like very rudimentary electronics, kind of like
Yeah,
holding it together, like
and that
whatever.
seems like a lot of work to like thread wire so it's just under the skin to like control, especially on the face. I'm assuming they don't need animation on the face all that much.
So I feel like this might imply that Stitched are a lot more cyborg robot than we had originally thought.
Yeah, a lot more. Is it the Stalkers um from the Mortal Engine series than
Yeah,
just there's more going on to it than we recognize or we've seen so far.
yes. So it'll be interesting to see more about that. But
Yeah,
yeah, we learned a lot new stuff about Stitched, and that's always fun.
yeah. I also thought that burn the handlers to stop the Stitch was a really bad idea because that seems like a really good way of making sure that the Stitch don't get new orders and just keep smashing their way through a crowd.
I suppose.
I don't know. It
But
just I
like
guess it makes them
probably if they keep smashing their way through the crowd, they're easier to work around and
sure. It's
whatever than
predictable.
if they're changing up what they're doing.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're right. They'd probably like still be a big problem after you've taken out the controls.
yeah. But I guess it means that they're like predictable.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the final monster to discuss here is Whiskers, who we finally get a physical description of. When we first heard of him, we were like imagining what he might look like, but now we know.
Yeah.
He's got this whole sort of like headless cat look, prowling about, like
hmm
a very cool description. Certainly not at all what I was imagining.
Not at all. Though think I think someone shared some fan art of Whiskers with us at some point,
Yes.
and I don't remember it well enough offhand to like really compare it to the picture or to the my mental image it from this description.
Mhm.
But I thought it was interesting that it seemed like Mauer did not have real control over it, besides sending it away and then letting it come close, and then sending it away and then letting it come close.
Oh, I thought that was the opposite of what he was doing. I thought he was summoning it close and letting it wander off, and then summoning it close and letting it wander off.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. You could very well be right. I could have
But the fact that it's controlled by a whistle is also an interesting
interesting.
new
Absolutely.
thing. I wonder how much control there is in the whistle. Like, I kind of assume that it's just like one
Come here
command,
or go
blow
away.
or not blow.
It's definitely binary.
Yeah, but like probably they'd have the technology to make like creatures that you could just like whistle a tune to control it, kind of like Pied Piper style.
Like that makes sense. Yeah.
Not in this
Like,
case for Whiskers, but
but
I'm
just
sure I'm
overall,
sure
like
that
yeah.
I'm sure somebody's working on that project somewhere.
The wise rats was that, and then they got a
Oh,
hold of their own.
totally.
They
Yep.
got a hold of their own whistle. And
Yep, we've solved it. That's definitely what they are.
yep. All right. Do you want to move? Okay. We don't have anything for historical references here. Is there anything else you want to talk about for the monster corner?
No, I don't think so. A lot
Cool.
of monsters, but we got to talk about the protagonist monsters.
Sai felt like he should be offended. So yeah, the thing that really I found fascinating about Psy, these chapters, or this whole arc, was this line. Part of me very much wanted to hear every word the shepherd was saying, but we had other issues. Because, yeah, I'm fascinated by Psy's fascination with the shepherd. Like, we sort of see him respect Hale a little bit, and like, he doesn't really ever respect anybody outside of the lambs. And it's interesting because I don't feel like Psy doesn't really know Mauer. He's
Mhm.
barely interacted with him, and it kind of feels like he's more fascinated by the idea of Mauer than Mauer himself.
Yes. I
Like,
sort of feel like it's just like,
he's fabricated this whole, "Oh, you are me, but my on the opposite side."
yes. Yeah, exactly. I think
Plus,
that Mauer is what Sylvester wants to be when he grows up.
yeah, but I don't know that we've necessarily yet seen that Mauer actually is that, rather than
Really?
Psy just like, clearly Mauer is really good at what he does, and he's
Mhm.
manipulative and all that, but it's maybe I'm just not as good as reading people as Psy is, because it feels like Mauer and I don't know, it feels like Psy really has built Mauer up to a level that we have
Sure.
the like there's
I think
not
you're right. I think that certainly his mental picture of Mauer is much more imposing than the man himself.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess that kind of leads to the you were supposed to see me as an equal, you butt.
That was so funny.
It is, it's just the contrast between the like two bits of that sentence.
Yeah,
Like,
yes. Because definitely Mauer sees himself as the equal of someone who refers to other people as
you
you
butt.
butt.
Yeah. I mean, pale spoilers ish. That felt very Verona ish as a line.
I can see that. Yep.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought was interesting was like when Mary was asking about Lacey, I'm like, shouldn't we go back for her and like do something about her being captured and accused of
Being the
whatever?
academy or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, shouldn't we go back for her? And then Sai was like, huh, I didn't expect that you would care about that. Uh, kind of a point against you that you do care about Lacey in that way.
I read that line very differently,
Oh,
in that I thought that he is surprised that Mary cares that Lacey has been captured, and then realizes that she doesn't actually care that Lacey is captured, except that Lacey being captured is evidence and proof of her own failure with the poison earlier on. So that like
okay.
it's that Mary is unhappy that she has made this mistake that has allowed Lacey to be captured, and Lacey is completely ancillary to that
Okay, I can see that
situation.
too. The funny thing is that both of those things are the sort of things that could be true.
Yes, with Sai, absolutely,
Yeah,
and with Mary.
yeah. Well, Mary definitely is upset that she failed and probably would see Lacey's capture as a point against
Hmm.
herself as her failure. But Sai is just such a butt against Lacey.
Yeah, well, he was.
But he was kind to her at the end there.
Yeah, exactly.
I liked when I said that Lacey was like
Like
more
aghast.
shocked at him actually being polite for 2 seconds than.
Well, I kind of feel like she's done. Like before then, I assume every single one of their interactions was her being Hale's assistant and working in the lab and just inflicting whatever Hale does on him. And this is the first time that they've interacted in the field, as it were,
Okay,
and connections built in foxholes or whatever.
that's true. So now he's starting to see her as like an independent person rather than just part
Like,
of the academy machine.
yeah, yeah. Here now,
I
she's
can
like,
see that.
okay, she's
Yeah.
worked, she's been out here, she's done stuff in the
She's
same.
earned a little bit of recognition.
Exactly. We've worked together now rather than she's worked on me.
Okay, I can see that. I can see that as being Sai's mindset towards her as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And just
I
like,
also,
yeah, the kind of also like a bit of respect that like, oh, you've actually put yourself in danger.
mhm, yeah.
I'm sure there's a certain aspect of like contempt by the lambs and probably all the different projects
Mhm.
towards the academy, like, oh, you sit up in your high tower and drink your wine in your crimson room, and we're the ones who actually are putting ourselves on the line for the academy.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe some extension of that there.
Mhm. we talked already about the plot versus strategy thing
Yeah.
that Sai brings up, but I just thought that the way he worded it, this is usually the part where I fuck things up.
Yeah,
It's
and
like, oh, he's being self-aware for once.
that's the thing. I think Sai is self-aware often enough that he can be like, "Yeah, I'm self-aware. I know when I'm being ridiculous, even when he's not being self-aware.
True.
Just barely enough that he's okay with that."
Yeah. I think that's part of why Sylvester is just such a fun character, and we like him a
Oh,
lot. It's just because
absolutely.
he's just so ridiculous.
Yeah. I also wanted to comment in 1 or no, 2.10, not 1.10, despite our notes title.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
no, I was looking at it real quick. That how often he notes that Mary is right there with him.
Oh yeah, because he's
It's
still
like
hyper aware of everything she does. Because he's
exactly constantly, and he just like comments
Mhm.
always. Like it's every few paragraphs. And Mary was right there with me, and Mary is right behind me, and I held Mary's hand, and Mary was there, and
Yep.
you know, yeah, I don't necessarily have more to say about that. Just commenting and pointing out that Mary is there, and I don't know if that's Mary being sketch or if that's just Mary being supportive.
You and your Mary is sus theory.
I, I don't trust her. I don't trust her.
I think
Um,
it's hilarious.
and you know, if I'm going to compare Sai to Verona real quick again, the
Hmm.
line "My legs were sore from a more than usual amount of running" felt very Verona-ish.
Yes. I think Verona is pretty much Psy in the other verse in a lot of ways.
I feel Verona's a much less shitty human being.
Well,
As
yes.
like in terms of like, I don't necessarily think Sai is a shitty human being, but Sai tries to present himself as a shitty human being,
Yes. That's
whereas
true.
Verona just believes herself to be a shitty human being and isn't.
Yeah. There are certainly differences, but I think that there's a lot in common between those two characters.
It'd be interesting to see the lambs in the other verse
Oh, man.
awakened
They'd
by
be
a third.
terrifying.
Well, I don't know. I feel like Sai would be forsworn immediately.
Well, yes, obviously.
Well, unless he's able to like finagle some rule of
No, it'd
discourse.
be a rule of discourse, yeah.
Yeah, like what happens if you do in your awakening, I am a liar. So the spirits just expect this of you.
Mhm.
Um anyway, let's move on to the other lambs, unless there's anything more you want to point out about Sai in this bit.
No. Although, on the subject of Sai being obsessed with Mary and noticing that, I kind of felt that Lillian was also similarly, she's a little starry eyed for Sai.
Well, she was like so happy to be needed and wanted and so hurt. And was like, all right,
Yep.
I've used you. I've got
It's
the
like,
piece
we're
of land.
here. We need your help, Lillian. She's like, great. I'm so happy.
I have my poisons, I have my scalpels, I have everything. It's like just the scalpels. Bye.
Mhm. Bye. Get lost. At least Sai is nice to her and says, what I meant is.
Sai realizes that was like, wait, no, that's not what I meant to say to you.
Yeah. And he does send off Mary, which is proof that he's being sincere
Yeah,
because,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
It's like both of you go together rather
yes.
than, but yeah, just like it's interesting that Sai notes that she seems hurt.
Hmm. And speaking of Mary, I really felt like the way she fights reminds me of the elves in Lord of the Rings.
Well, to me, I've been playing Baldur's Gate recently, and I've played D&D in my day. Um, if we're going back to that five, that sort of like D&D archetypes here, it feels like Mary's the rogue of the group.
Hmm. Yeah, but I was thinking more like the elves in Tolkien, especially like you see it in Legolas because he's in a lot of action scenes
Sure.
that you see, and he is the sort of fighter where he's like just kind of dancing around
Yeah.
and like everything she does is like precise and she keeps her skirt clean and she
Yes.
lands just so, and it's just like it's the sort of like you see it in the adaptations of Lord of the Rings where Legolas is like fighting the Oliphant and
Yeah.
slides down his trunk and that sort of thing, and it's just like that
Skate
sort of
skateboards down
yeah,
or
exactly.
snowboards down the stairs. Yeah.
It's just that sort of like precise, graceful, like
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
yeah. It's like she fights like an elf.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I was also wondering if I don't necessarily know that I have a lot of like textual grounding for this, but it feels like she's throwing. This is me countering everything else I have said about Mary being sus, but
Finally.
it feels on some level that she's like all in on the lambs, sort of replacing the bit of social structure that she had with Percy and with her brothers with the lambs.
Mhm.
Um, assuming she's being genuine.
Yes, of course. Obviously, she's being genuine
Yeah,
because she is completely innocent of any suspicion whatsoever.
absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, if she's being genuine, it feels like very psychologically unhealthy as someone who has no psychology education besides like pop culture. It feels unhealthy for her to be replacing these like support structures and lives, everything that she's had, her parent figure and her family, with these new people.
Is that bad? Isn't that a good thing?
I have
Like,
no
she
idea.
needs that support structure, and
Maybe,
so.
maybe it just feels like, I don't know. It feels like if that gets taken away from her for whatever reason, it ends
Well,
up
that's
badly
true.
for her. Is more, I guess, the badly that I'm pointing at is it leaves her
Okay.
vulnerable.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, and
Yeah.
I also did want to note that she does a lot of like holding hands, which really brings me to mind of like The Shining and the twins just like being creepy. Like the creepy children often hold hands.
See, I
And
kind
have
of
you
think that is like a normal thing for children in this
Sure, but, like, I'm just
setting.
picturing, like, contextually, it just feels super weird.
I think you're just reading into it your
Maybe.
suspicions.
Just saying, if there's is there anything else?
I have nothing more to say about Mary.
That was very contemptuous.
I have nothing to say about.
Um, yeah, so this bit, I'm the yeah, so Gordon at the end is like, "That was awful. Hated it. The acting, the playing, the lame duck, trying to sway the crowd, doing nothing." And
That
my
was such a great line.
Yeah. So my first thought there is that he's teasing Sai, but like thinking about more, I think he's being entirely genuine. He does not like that. It doesn't. It's not. He's not doing enough, and I think that's kind of
Okay,
meant
yeah,
to
yeah.
really tell us and be representative of like the difference between the different lambs and their roles and what they're supposed to do. And it shows
Hmm.
that like this here, because we've had so much of Sai these past few chapters being like, oh, I want to be doing what Gordon is doing. I don't want to be doing the actiony stuff that I'm doing. I want to be up there on stage doing, being the face, being the victim and like having everybody's attention on me while other people are doing things in the background while I distract the crowd. And this is Gordon, I think, saying the same thing that we've been seeing Sai say throughout these past few chapters.
Hmm. Yeah. So I thought that, yeah, that's a good insight on his character, I think, just from that one line.
Yeah, like we get a lot from him. I think it was in my live read. I want to say it was Megafire, but I could be entirely wrong because I don't remember well enough. I'm going to go check real quick so I'm not lying.
So that
Um,
you're not forsworn or
that is
gainsaid.
that is exactly it. Let me go real quick and we can cut this. Blah 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 blah. Where are my lines?
No, see, you left in all the fluff stuff I said last time, so I'm going to leave in all the fluff stuff you say
Uh,
this time.
I think it's worth leaving in the fluff stuff. I mean, why not? People,
It can be fun sometimes.
yeah, I'm just trying to find my. Where is it? I can find it easily enough when. Oh, there we go. Whoever it was, while I'm looking here, uh, said that Gordon is basically Captain America, the Hydra version, and in reaction to this line, and I kind of get that here. He wants to be he wants, and he's meant to be the face. He's meant to be the hero. It was Spinagon. I was entirely wrong. And yeah, Megafire says in reaction to that, Gordon likes doing things. I think he likes getting in people's faces and speaking with his actions, and that that to me feels very right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I definitely kind of, the first read, I read this as genuine in the sense of he just hates acting and
Yeah.
wants to just be punching stuff. And then in the retrospect, I thought he was teasing.
See, I went the
I
other
had
way
I had the other
entirely.
way from you.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I can see it being both at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah,
There's
he
some truth,
probably
some
disliked it,
truth.
but he's just playing it up to get a rise out of Sai,
Yeah, like
and it works.
yeah, like brothers.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing that that I thought about here is that I was pretty sure Helen could take that bullet. That
Oh, yeah, yeah.
like
We were worried that Mauer
yeah,
would shoot Helen. Yeah,
but
she probably could take the bullet, but
Helen we know is an octopus in human form, so that
mhm.
means that her brain is distributed throughout her limbs. So if she takes a bullet to the head, she's fine.
Yeah, but you see, Sai wasn't trying to stop her from being killed.
He was trying to prevent the crowd from seeing her
He was
survive.
trying to prevent Ibit from
Oh yeah,
beating him into the ground
for
when they got back to the academy.
yeah, Helen's fine, but
Yeah, like
Ibit doesn't want to take the time of beating
Helen,
a
Helen
bullet
can
out
take a bullet with very little damage. Sai, on the other hand, cannot take a fist from Ibit.
of yeah. There's only it, it's proportional to how pissed Ibit is that he has to dig a bullet out of Helen's like skull.
Yes.
It's like that takes a lot of time, it's effort. And,
Hmm. Yes.
yeah,
But no, I think you're probably right. She probably would survive easily,
yeah,
unless Maury got very lucky with
and
his
yeah.
aim.
I don't
But
know why. I'm pretty sure Mary could regrow. Not Mary, sorry. Helen could regrow from a severed pinky if she needed to.
well, certainly Ibit would be able to reconstruct her from a severed pinky, but
Oh well,
he would
yes.
be very annoyed about it.
Yep.
So that's all I have to say about the rest of the lambs.
Me too.
And I feel like we should acknowledge Mauer, although most of what I have to say about him is tied into the plotting that we've already talked about.
Yeah, but I feel like, and I see that's what your notes kind of allude to. W- Do you think Mauer is actually a man of faith?
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind elaborating on that? Just
I
to,
see no reason to think otherwise,
okay,
essentially.
fair enough.
Um,
You don't think Sai is
like
true when he's saying,
everything that Mauer has done, even like the horrible things that he's done in
yeah,
releasing whiskers and plotting whatever, none of that seems out of character for a man of faith.
sure. I'm not. I don't have an opinion here, and I was just curious to hear if you did.
Yeah,
I
I
don't. I
I'm
don't.
willing to buy that unless there's
Mhm,
possibly like he's like struggling with that. Like he goes to the war. He's like, oh, this is so awful. Like, how could there be a god, sort of thing.
sure.
But like a lot of religious people have those periods in when things go
And
down, and I don't think that would really.
And I think the biggest piece of evidence for what you're saying is that he still has that beat up, tarnished crucifix.
Mhm.
And if he was not a man
Yeah.
of faith, I feel like he would
Well, if he
use
wasn't a
the
man of faith, he'd
body,
probably still have it to like kind
but
of cover for it.
but
But
I think he would have it in a more public place. Like that was a private, it would be a place that he could point to it, to the community rather than to his like
sure.
close friends.
Hmm.
Um,
But yeah, I don't see any reason to think that he's
he's not.
actually
Yeah,
like just pretending to be a man of faith
rile
to
up the
hold on
crowd.
to the power he has or something.
Especially since we know that the church is not an avenue for power.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Oh,
Hmm.
all right. And before we move on to the end game here, I I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit in the past, but I'm kind of feel that the crown. This is a theory, bold and specific prediction that
Aha.
the crown is behind these various groups of rebels and whatnot that we've seen. Um,
Ooh.
I feel the crown, the institution of the crown, or the person of the crown, whichever it happens to be, has seen that the academies are getting too powerful. They are the rowdy aristocracy, and the crown clearly depends on the academy for its weapons of war, for all that.
Hmm.
Um, so this budding rebellion that we're kind of seeing a little bit is a multifaceted plot, both to bring down the academies a peg or two, to maintain the power of the crown, and at the same time spend the desire that whatever disenfranchised members of the population would have for rebellion.
I think that's a great theory.
Okay. And like to me,
I
this
mean, it's a plot twist that I could see happening.
yeah. And I really feel that, it fits the themes of, biopunk in the setting of like people and institutions being really the tools of the people in power.
Hmm.
Like nothing is external, everything is coming from within.
Yes, it's like, yeah, you think that you're outside the control
Yeah.
of the powers that be. You're not.
Yeah. The real world in the Matrix is just a second level of the program.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know, we're the emperor playing both sides.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah, I feel like Wildbow is not the sort of person to go for the obvious plot twist, and this is a plot twist that I think I've seen in enough stories
Maybe.
that I feel it's unlikely just from like a meta narrative perspective, but
Perhaps.
I do think it's a good plot twist, and it would be I think very appropriate if it turned out to be true.
We will see, and I'm
We
excited to
will
see
see.
this play out.
Yes, because you're getting to the point where I think there's like 2 chapters left that you've read before.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Which is very
so
scary.
we're going to be expecting a lot more bold and specific predictions from you
Yep.
in the near future.
It's scary because I'm looking at my analysis in my live read last year, which is pre-baby and pre-baby brain, and I was a lot smarter a year ago or year and a half ago. I feel much stupider looking at this text right now than I did back then, and that is, I tell you, a scary thought.
No, it's good because now I look competent in comparison.
You have
Because
always.
you're now down at my level.
That is very much not true. I am still way above you.
Yeah. Anyway,
Anyway.
shall we move on to our discussion question?
Yep.
So this is our long-standing discussion question from when Malia was on. Tell us about a story in which the character's abilities are simultaneously an advantage and a disadvantage.
So Propaganda Pagoda said worm, basically all parahumans. So yeah, that is
Honestly, that is very
the
apropos,
point
yes.
of the powers. Yeah. They also said more seriously in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, people can learn the understanding of energy flows, diagrams, and fundamental natures of some slice of phenomenon or reality like stone, fire, life forms, booms, and use available energy from below the surface of the earth to set off or interact with those phenomenons. That's what they call alchemy. There's one thing an alchemist must not attempt: human transmutation, creating life basically. Nonetheless, some have tried anyway, always a price is extracted. Part of the body critical to some fundamental drive in the alchemist is lost. Still, that lost has a corresponding gain. Instead of having to prepare a magic circle to do magic, they can close the circle of their arms by clapping their hands instead. This greatly improves their versatility. And then there were a bunch of other examples that I didn't think would be good to share just for the sake of spoilers for everybody if you're interested in watching that. But they also added the character gains an advantage one could call greater power, access to power, or versatility with their power, but they lose something that may have been more useful based on their actual wants and needs.
Sure. And I think that, yeah, that's a great answer.
I agree.
Haven't seen...
Same.
So I don't know. But I do think that this theme of, gaining power requiring a significant sacrifice is pretty common.
Absolutely.
In a lot of
you sort
stories.
of see it, like, I don't know, just the one that came to mind as you were saying right there is Voldemort in Harry Potter sacrificing bits of his soul to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's a pretty common bit of like lich thing.
That's the basis of being a lich. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, or Lord of the Rings, Sauron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, that kind of would be my answer to this question.
Yeah.
Because in Tolkien's mythology, he does, I think, a really good job of showing how mortality and immortality are both simultaneous an advantage and a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Where, like, both men and elves are kind of
Can
jealous of each other.
envy the other. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad that Propaganda Pagoda gave us a great answer to that.
I
And
agree.
now it's time to choose a new discussion question.
I don't know what that was. Sorry.
I'm
I
going
am
to take a
tired
clip of
and
that, and
delayed.
that will be our Monster Corner soundbite. All right. So you came up with this question, so you get to read it.
Great. So, if you were the lambs, or Psy, I guess, but it really is a team activity, how would you have handled the situation of the crowd in this, or not just the crowd, this whole situation of Whiskers being loose and the people being scared? Or do both, or reverse it. If you were Mauer, how would you have handled the situation?
Yes. Tell us
Assuming
your chess strategies for this particular scenario on either
exactly.
side of the board.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else you would like to talk about?
Well, I suppose we should bring up the soundbite contest that we are totally running.
Yes.
I actually had an idea because honestly, asking people to come up with sound bites is possibly a little bit much to ask of people who are just casually listening and don't want to put in any effort or anything like that. But like our theme song is just like a nursery tune that we turned into a theme tune. So maybe if they don't want to make a soundbite, what they could do is like tell us a nursery song that we could turn into
That
a
works
soundbite.
too. That sounds great. I like
And then we
that.
could like take a bunch of like these little children's songs and play
Kind of
them
make it a
badly on the
thing.
piano and make it kind of a thing throughout, just like a couple bars of each. So,
I like
uh,
that.
so the contest is being changed. Instead of sending us a soundbite, unless
We
you
can
want to send a
still
soundbite, you can still
still
do
send a
that. Totally do
soundbite.
that. But if you want to just be like, oh, you should totally use such and such a song as the bar for this, as the intro sting to this, then do that, and we'll turn that into some beautiful cacophony to play in between sections.
Yeah.
The only rule is it has to be in the public domain. If you're not sure, submit it anyway, and I'll figure that out.
So that means, unfortunately, no Taylor Swift.
No Taylor Swift. I don't want the big records coming after me or Taylor Swift's personal record coming after me.
This would be an opportunity to meet Taylor Swift. So,
Oh, that's true.
no.
Maybe she could guest on our podcast.
Yeah. Sorry for stealing your song. Could you sit and talk with us for a bit?
Yes. Let us
Yeah.
tell you about this great book called Twig.
Yep. I mean, that would be a way to boost Wildbow's Patreon.
That is true. So,
Mhm.
speaking of Patreon, thanks for listening. We hope you'll continue along with us for this trip into Twig, which you can read along with us at twigserial.wordpress.com. And if you do, or even if you don't, please go to Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/Wildbow and support him. It's how he can produce all these great stories and settings. And especially now that he's between stories and taking a break for like the first time in a decade that he's leaving a gap between his works.
I think more than a decade?
Possibly.
Yeah.
So, like, now more than ever is what, like, any creator who depends on their audience for their livelihood, when they're taking a break between projects, is when there's a lot of stress about their livelihood possibly
Persisting.
dwindling. So, you, like, go to his Patreon and make sure that he is completely reassured that we're here for him and that he has nothing to worry about. He can take his time and he can go on his vacation and he'll
Deserve
take
it
care.
vacation.
Yeah, he deserves it and has nothing to worry about. So go to his Patreon and make sure that that you send him that message in cold hard cash.
Yep.
And in the meantime, you can leave your answers to our DQ in our Reddit thread.
And also, we will also accept discussion, answer questions, and submissions for our contest in the Doof Media thread. You can also reach us at totwigpodcast@gmail.com, totwig podcast on Twitter, the Reddit thread in Parahumans, and the discussion thread in the Doof Discord, where we are still
and ever shall be
lurking as friends of Doof.
Yes.
In the next episode, we're going to finish up this arc. We're going to cover 2.11 and Enemy 2. And then
Sweet.
we have a pale relevant, Ridget, I forgot his last name.
Fall branch.
Ridget Fall Branch. I was going to say Ridget Fiddle Branch, and that's not right. A Ridget Fall Branch related
Yes.
fact.
So if you've read Pale, and I'm pretty sure everyone in our audience has read Pale, except for that one person, you know who you are. But you will probably remember some discussion of a war between the red squirrels and the black squirrels.
No, it's the reds, the browns, and the blacks. There's all 3.
Yeah, but brown squirrels aren't a real thing.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not.
They're absolutely real.
I'm just being argumentative, but
there's Ottawa is the base, as far as I can tell, the intersection of the 3 habitats. Where I grew up in northern New Jersey, only had the brown ones, like grays. They look basically like rats with bushy tails.
Okay, so bonus biofact about squirrels. Black squirrels are actually gray squirrels in disguise.
Yes, but they look very different.
They look different, but they are the same species.
I'm sure they fight.
So the red squirrels, the American red squirrel is a species of squirrel.
Ridget Fall Branch.
And the eastern gray squirrel is a species of squirrel. And those black squirrels that you see running around, those are eastern gray squirrels, but they're melanistic. So melanism is kind of like the opposite of albinism, where instead of having no pigment, you have like all of the pigment. So this little guy here, this is Basil. He's a black cat. He is melanistic. He has so much pigment that he is completely black.
Hi, Basil.
Lots of animals can be melanistic, and squirrels can be melanistic. So black squirrels and gray squirrels are not 2 different kinds of squirrels. They are the same kind of squirrel.
If I may interject, though, so they're presumably subspecies or breeds of the same species. But where I grew up, for example, in New Jersey, and that area, I've never saw a single black squirrel. Whereas up here, I see almost exclusively black squirrels. So
Yeah.
is one of them like are the genes for the melanistic squirrels dominant, or
I read something suggesting that there might be evolutionary pressure for squirrels to be more likely to be melanistic in northern latitudes.
Okay.
I didn't really pursue that line of reasoning.
Sure.
But
so that means that
so certainly where we live, most of the gray squirrels are
black.
melanistic, are black squirrels.
So this is, if we follow human social structures, odds are the war between the grays and the blacks is much more brutal than the war between the blacks and grays and the reds.
Possibly, yes. But anyway, that was just the bonus introductory biofact. The real biofact is that this war between red squirrels and black squirrels is very real, happens in real life, and in real life they use legit bio warfare against each other.
Elaborate, please.
True fact. Okay, so first of all, you should know that this is actually happening in the UK. So
not in Ontario.
So not in Ontario. We're talking about a different species of red squirrel. So not the American red squirrel that lives around here. We're talking about the Eurasian red squirrel that is native to the UK. And the eastern gray squirrel that is native here but invasive in the UK.
Sure.
Now, the eastern gray squirrel carries the virus for squirrelpox, the squirrelpox virus, SQPV, which it is immune to. And American red squirrels are also immune to it. But Eurasian red squirrels are not immune to it. So if they encounter an infected gray squirrel or black squirrel, they will die a horrible death within like a few days.
Lovely.
And yes, and that is partially why gray squirrels are considered invasive. They're taking over the UK and killing off the red squirrels with their bioweapon of squirrelpox virus. Very brutal. Totally see why Ridget was
vicious, horrible
in defending the red squirrels against the invading black squirrels.
Fair enough. How does that apply in North America? Do you know? Like, are the black squirrels, are the red squirrels?
So this doesn't apply in North America in real life.
Sure.
Ridget and her wars are purely idealistic, presumably, because the American red squirrel is not is not going to die from the squirrelpox virus.
Okay.
So, because
Interesting.
the American red squirrel and the eastern gray squirrel have evolved together in North
As
America, so
right.
they're
It's a much harsher, more brutal
yeah.
war.
Yeah. It is kind of reminiscent of certain historical events where invading human populations killed off
Don't say.
native populations again with pox viruses.
Yep.
Obviously, it's a lot less horrific when it's just squirrels than when it's literal genocide.
Yeah.
But
I get where you're. Yeah.
but let's keep it lighthearted. Biofact, bio warfare between squirrels. Yes.
Perfect.
Anyway,
All
with
right.
that somber note, let's wrap this up because it is getting late.
It is.
And
Thank you again for being patient with my baby.
mhm. And yeah, we will talk to you next time.
Look forward to it. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Have a great night.